Good morning. I'm back. Yeah, I had taken a few weeks off for personal stuff, and then last week I decided, okay, I'm going to do another show, and I did a whole pretty darn good too, and the microphone, well, the audio wasn't working, so so I thought, do I really want to record this again? No. So that ended up in the garbage. So this time I actually tested the microphone. At least it was working on my test. I hope it's working now. I can't tell. Anyhow, there is a lot to talk about. So somehow I'm going to try to fit this in a few minutes. There are quite a few films opening, or have opened in Hong Kong yesterday, because here, as I've said, here in Hong Kong things open on Thursday. The first is the British film called Misbehavior, which is based on a true story. It stars Keira Knightley, and it's about the Miss World, Miss Universe, I think it's Miss Universe pageant of God, I saw the film so long ago, back in the '60s, where they had where the winner was black, and it was a big thing back then. You know what? This is okay. It's you know what? As I said, I saw it so long ago. I barely remember what it's about, which gives you an idea of what I thought of it. It's okay. It's it's very look. It's very meh. Let me just put that. It's very meh. If you've got nothing better to do and you really, really, really want to go to the movies and you want something light and feel good and whatever, go see Misbehavior. If not, wait for it. I think it's already on the streaming services in some markets, as a lot of films are. Um, it's you know what? In normal circumstances, I'd say no. You know what? Okay. Second film I haven't seen is Ava or Ava, and the fact that I don't even know how to pronounce the name tells you that I haven't seen it. I really don't know well, I don't know much about it. I know it stars Jessica Chastain. I know it's been getting terrible reviews. A colleague of mine saw it the other night, and he says, yes, it really is bad. So I said, well, I guess I'm really not interested in seeing it because A, it's Jessica Chastain, and B, it's bad. And I got plenty of other bad films to talk about, so what do I need to see that one for? So that's called Ava or Ava, whatever. Third film is a religious film called Fatima. I was supposed to see that this week, but what happened was my village bus, I don't know what happened. It was late. It was like 20 minutes late. And by the time it came, I just went, oh, screw that, because then I would have been late. And I hate being late for movies. I honestly don't know. Maybe this is a Hong Kong thing, that people will walk in like 15, 20 minutes into a movie. And I'm thinking, really? I remember with Avengers Endgame, and those films, people are walking in 20 minutes late. I'm thinking, really? Like, how can you do that? But they do here in Hong Kong. So, you know what? I didn't want to be late. Even if I was going to be a few minutes late, I didn't want to be late. So I said, no, I'm not coming. So I don't know it's some religious thing. I don't know what it's about. But anyway, the final film that opened yesterday, I did see, and I saw it yesterday. So I actually remember what it's about. I sort of wish I didn't. But it's called 49 Days. Now, there's quite a few films with that title. This is a Taiwanese film, and it's new. And I'm going to talk about that now. Now, my feeling is, with 49 Days, well, with anything really, there are some people who shouldn't be writing screenplays, and there are some people who shouldn't be directing movies, and there's others still who shouldn't be calling themselves actors. Unfortunately, they're all involved in this project, and they didn't listen to me. So what you got with 49 Days is a poorly conceived and poorly executed steaming pile of doggy do. Now, listen about this, because I got a lot to say, and it's and I think I'm what I got to say is good, even though I've just given away what I feel about this film. This is billed as, I'm going to quote here because I got the production notes from the company. It's billed as the first Taiwanese movie that combines Guanluoyin, wait for it, with virtual reality. Okay, so what's Guanluoyin? It is a Chinese word, and it's apparently a dark witchcraft, leading living people, to descend into hell to visit the dead. Now, isn't that fun? You know? So, so it combines that with virtual reality. It's the first. Wow, like who knew, you know? Okay, now the story is we have Daniel Lee, who's played by Chinese American Louis Liu. Now, if you don't know who Louis Liu is, no, nobody else does either. I think this is his first film and might very well be his last. He is the vice president of a VR company in Taiwan, and while giving a presentation to foreign investors and other bigwigs, he has an unsettling vision of a young woman in a black dress. Now, later that night, and in fact at 4:44 in the morning, 4:44, you know, if you know your Chinese culture, you know that 4 is the homonym. The Chinese word for 4 is a homonym for death. So 4:44 is the Chinese equivalent of what some Westerners, not me, some Westerners consider to be 666, the mark of the devil, but 4:44 is death. So later that night at 4:44 in the morning, the vision returns, and a timer that counts back from 49 appears on his forearm. Yeah, this arm. Now, he's unnerved by the whole experience, as anybody would. And what he does is he hires a police sketch artist to draw a picture of the woman that he sees. But apparently, when he returns, not apparently, like, when he returns to his office with something for the man to drink, he finds that the man has strangled himself, or it seems that he strangled himself to death inside his fish tank. Okay. Now, needless to say, police detective Yi Jen, who's played by Lorene Ren, she's a Taiwanese actress, she thinks Daniel killed the man, and her suspicions of his guilt only grow when others in Daniel's circle of friends and acquaintances start dropping off. Rather gruesomely, too, in the days that follow. Now, eventually, though, Yi-Jen starts to believe in Daniel's innocence because the script tells her so. I mean, there's no logic to explain why she suddenly believes in him. And the two of them begin a search for the young woman that leads them to a Taoist temple that is run by a young priest named Zheng Haoyu, who's played by Samuel Koo, who's from Hong Kong, by the way. Now there, Daniel gets a tour of hell, while Yi-Jen goes along for the ride. I can't figure out, considering like he's the one who's doing this practice that gets him into Guanloyin, how is it that she goes along for the ride? I didn't quite understand that one. But anyhow, there's a lot I didn't understand about this film. Now, she goes along for the ride because it's we learn throughout the film, she has her own disturbing past that just so happens to be not too dissimilar to that mysterious young woman's. Now, this is a complete mess of the film. Now, the story by award-winning producer Pan Zhiyuan. Now, don't ask me, I do this award because I don't know what he wanted. Just, the production notes said he won something. But when I looked him up on the internet, he got nominated for a lot of stuff. I don't know if he won anything. So I'd like to know what he won. Okay, the story just defies logic here at every turn, and it includes such ridiculous lines of dialogue that that wouldn't surprise me to learn that the actors just broke up laughing during the shooting process. I mean, they're thinking, do I really have to say this? There were times where I wish I had a light that I could have written down some of the dialogue, because I was thinking about turning on my phone, but that would have pissed people off around me. But honestly, I wanted to write down some of the dialogue. It was so hackneyed. It was really ridiculous. Now, as I said, maybe they broke up laughing, or maybe they didn't, because with the exception of venerable Hong Kong actor Tai Bo, who appears in just one scene, but his name is very high up on the list of credits, I think to call these people actors is a stretch. Now, even worse than that is this glaring plot hole that's left over at the end of the film that must have been apparent to Pan and first-time feature director Louis Jun in post-production, because they seemingly, it seems that they tacked on this absurd epilogue that only serves to shine more light on their ineptitude. I mean, you're just like, the film ends, and then you're thinking, wait a second. And then there's this voiceover that sort of gives this answer to the wait a second. And it's just so preposterous that, people in my audience, there was a mixture of laughter and groaning. Now, as I said, the film opened yesterday in Hong Kong. Unless you're a masochist, stay very, very far away from this one. This is easily one of the worst films I've seen this year, and I'm sure the distributor will never invite me to one of their films again after, if they should happen to hear me talk about this film or read my review on my website. So that's called 49 Days from Taiwan. Okay, now let's get into something better. Marginally better, but better. Okay. The first film, I'm going to talk about a couple films that are on recently came out on Netflix. And I'd say, yeah, they're worth your time. They're not the best films I've seen this year, but they're worth your time. The first one is called The Devil All the Time. And it stars a lot of people. It stars Tom Holland, who people would know as Spider-Man. And it stars, we have Bill Skarsgård, who was the clown in the 2 It films, and Haley Bennett, who was recently in Swallow, and Sebastian Stan, who was in the Avengers franchise, Riley Keough, who's Elvis's granddaughter, she was in Logan Lucky, Jason Clarke, who's been in a lot of films. So it's got this, and of course it has, why is his name just not coming to me right now? Robert Pattinson, who was just in Tenet, and, of course, Twilight. Now, question we ask here is the world full of no good sons of bitches? Well, Willard Scott, who's Bill Skarsgård's character, seems to think so. And judging by the characters in this film, The Devil All the Time, he may just be right. Now, the time is post-war America, post-World War II America, to be more specific, in case you don't know what I mean by post-war, because there have been a few wars around. So this is post-World War II America, and Willard Russell has just returned from seeing brutal action in the Solomon Islands, and he's come back to his quiet town in America's heartland to make a life for himself. Now, unfortunately for Willard and for those around him, happiness is short-lived, as the sinners who populate a place called Knockemstiff, Ohio, and this is a real place, Knockemstiff, Ohio, who knew? Well, I suppose the people in Knockemstiff, Ohio knew. The sinners who populate Knockemstiff, Ohio, appear to have the upper hand. Now, 8 years after Willard and his wife Charlotte, who's played by Haley Bennett, they die in tragic circumstances. That's not really, well, it's sort of a spoiler, but it's in you see in the trailer that they've died. So it's not a big spoiler. Now, 8 years after they've died, their son Arvin, who's played by Tom Holland, he tries to build a life with his life with the help of his loving grandmother, Emma, his great-uncle, Erskine, and his adopted stepsister, Leona Lafferty, who's played by Eliza Scanlon, who was one of the sisters in Little Women. She also has her own personal family tragedy to process, so the two of them have a lot in common. The problem for Arvin is that evil is all around. From the town's false preacher, Reverend Preston Teagarden, played by Robert Pattinson. There's the corrupt sheriff, Lee Bodecker, played by Sebastian Stan. And there's Bodecker's murderous sister, Sandy, played by Riley Keough, and her husband, Carl, played by Jason Clarke. And as all their stories intertwine, Arvin finds that he can't escape from the events and the lessons that shaped his early life. That's pretty much what the story is about. There's a lot of story here. This is the thing. There's a lot of story here. Now, this film is directed by Antonio Campos, who did quite a few episodes of TV's The Sinner. Very interesting, similar theme. And it's co-written along with his brother Paolo. And it's based on the 2011 award-winning debut novel by Donald Ray Pollock, who also serves as the story's narrator here. Now, admittedly, I haven't read the book, although I'd like to now, but I'm curious to see how Pollock was able to pack so much story into 272 pages. There's a lot here. And unfortunately, this is a big problem with the movie, is that you have 3 storylines. You have Arvin's storyline, you have Lenora, his step-half sisters, whatever she's called, step-half sister. No, they're not related, but they live together. Her story, and then there's the Bodecker story, the sheriff's story, and with all these stories weaving in and out of each other, there's a lot going on. But Campos doesn't give audiences much to latch onto. After 138 minutes, so over 2 hours, 138 minutes, we don't understand any better why sinners do what they do. Maybe we're not supposed to understand it. Maybe they just do because evil's all around. I don't know. Now, while there ultimately is some retribution that takes place, let's call it karma, whatever you want to call it, if all that Campos is saying is that evil exists and there's little the faithful can do about it, it doesn't make for a very fulfilling story. The Coen brothers, as I was watching this, I was thinking, it seems at times very Coen-esque. But the Coens do it better. They're able to find humor and insight in in life's dark moments. But it just doesn't happen with this story. This is really a brutal story with it just sort of goes down, 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 down. It doesn't, and this is the unfortunate problem with the story. And I think maybe the film should have been made as a 3-part TV miniseries where Campos could have included more character depth. I think to me this was the problem with this film, is that there was just a lot of brutality, a lot of evil, and I don't mind that. Look, I watch TV shows like Mindhunter, I can deal with that, but it needs to have something where, more than the retribution that took place in the last 5 minutes of the movie. There needed to be more and more humor. Somehow dark humor just didn't have it. And apparently there's a whole backstory to the Reverend that's in the book. I don't know, I've read this. It's in the book, but it's not in the movie. I think, this is why I think, make it longer, make it a TV series, a mini-series. But anyhow, but to the director's credit, he gets great performances out of his cast, most of whom are not even American, let alone from Appalachia. We have Holland, Pattinson, and Henry Melling. Do you remember Henry Melling? He hasn't been in a lot, but I actually remembered him. There was a TV show a few years back, Merlin, about young Merlin, and Henry Melling was in a couple of episodes as this, I forget what his name was, but he was as a rival to Merlin, but he had evil going on. He has very, very striking eyes. That's what I remembered about him. So he's in this movie. He plays Lenora's father. Now, they're all British. You have Skarsgård, who's Swedish. We have Clark, Scanlon, and Mia Wasikowska, who plays Leonora's mother. They're all Australian. And they all do pretty decent Appalachian accents, I gotta say. Now, it's refreshing to see Holland playing something other than a spunky teenager who zip lines around against a green screen background. He can actually act. Who knew? And Pattinson, I really like him. He once again shows us that he's a lot more than a former teenage heartthrob, because he's not still, he's a former teenage heartthrob. Now, The Devil All the Time is available now on Netflix. It's, as I said, it's a flawed film. It can definitely test your patience at times. It can be slow going. But you know what? The performances, to me, make it worth watching. I think, it had potential. Didn't quite get there, but not bad. Certainly a lot better than 49. Okay. Finally, the last film I want to talk about is also on Netflix. And it's The Boys in the Band. It's the new version of The Boys in the Band. Now, I'll give you a little bit of background in case you don't know. 52 years ago, there was a little play about a group of gay men in New York City who come together to celebrate a friend's birthday, and it premiered off-Broadway. Now, few people, if anyone, expected the story to resonate with mainstream audiences. Getting it on stage to begin with was difficult enough. You had producers who weren't interested in backing the project. You had theater owners who didn't want a play like that staged in their premises. And there were very few actors who were willing to portray a gay character on stage. But playwright Mark Crowley persevered, and The Boys in the Band made it to Theater 4, which I think is still there. It's on West 55th. And it became an immediate hit with audiences and ran for an incredible 28 months and 1,001 performances. Very impressive. The play also garnered an Obie Award in 1968 for actor Cliff Gorman, who played Emery. Now, 2 years later, so 1970, filmmaker William Friedkin, yes, William Friedkin, the same guy who directed The Exorcist, probably my favorite horror film, he brought the play to the big screen using the original cast. Now, at the time, critics' reviews were mildly favorable. I think today they are much more favorable than they were back then. The gay community, however, was split. Some of them praised it as being groundbreaking, which it was, while others weren't happy about having gays being portrayed on screen as angry, self-hating characters, which they are. So, I can see both sides of that one. Now, although the actors were all thought at the time to be straight, At least 5 of the 9 later succumbed to AIDS-related illnesses, including Leonard Frey, who 1 year later went on to play Muttle the Tailor in Muttle Camzoil in Norman Jewison's beloved film Fiddler on the Roof. Remember the tailor Muttle Camzoil? As I was watching, I only watched the original The Boys in the Band last week because I'd never seen it, and I was looking at the actor Leonard Frey, and I'm thinking, he looks really familiar. And so I looked him up on IMDb, and he was Muttle the Tailor. And I was like, wow, who knew? I certainly didn't know. So, very interesting. But unfortunately, he died of age-related illnesses a few years after that. Now, in celebration of the play's 50th anniversary, a new production was mounted in 2018, this time on Broadway, and it stars Jim Parsons. People would know him from, of course, TV's The Big Bang Theory, but also Hidden Figures. Zachary Quinto, people would know him from many things. He's the newest, Mr. Spock in the Star Trek franchise. Of course, people know him from TV's Heroes. He was also in a great film last year called High Flying Bird, which I understand is going to be made into a sequel, or a sequel is going to be made. And Andrew Reynolds, people would know him from TV's Girls, Why Him, and A Simple Favor. And there's a few others, which I'll get to in a moment. Now, this new cast was notable for all being out. Everybody knows they're gay. No, they've said they're not. We don't know. They've said they're gay. Now, that production has now been brought to our TVs with a Netflix version directed by Obie and Tony Award winner Joe Mantello, who also directed the play's Broadway revival. Now, the time, as I said, a little bit, this was when it came out in 68. It was contemporary, so the time is 1968. And Michael, who's played by Jim Parsons, he's hosting a birthday party on his rooftop flat, nice flat by the way, for his friend Harold, who's played by Zachary Quinto. Now, perhaps it's a bit generous, though, to call them friends. They're more like frenemies. Very interesting. Now, invited to the party is Michael's part-time lover, Donald, played by Matt Bomer. Do I need to tell you who Matt Bomer is? Larry, who's played by Reynolds, and his partner, Hank, played by Tuck Watkins. People would know him probably from Desperate Housewives. And if you watch the TV show, the soap opera One Life to Live, he's apparently on that. There's Emery, played by Robin DeJesus. I've never seen him in anything. I don't know what he's done. There's and Bernard, who's played by Michael Benjamin Washington, who's in the new TV show Ratched. Now, also there is Tex, who's played by Charlie Carver. He was Felicity Huffman's one of the twins in Desperate Housewives. And he is a midnight cowboy that Emery has hired as a gift for Harold. Now, each of these men has their own inner demons to deal with, and they do so using retail therapy, prayer, drugs, alcohol, psychoanalysis, sex, cruelty, or a combination of those as their salve. Now, the evening takes a dark turn when Michael's straight old college roommate, Alan, played by Brian Hutchison, I've never seen him in anything, he's probably a Broadway actor, he suddenly shows up, and he's distraught over something that he's reluctant to reveal. Now, Michael then decides the time is right for a party game where facades are stripped away, revealing hidden truths that each man has kept repressed for so long. That's what the story is about. Now, it's very interesting to see how much has changed in 52 years and how much hasn't, Sort of sad, but okay, interesting. The timing of this production is all the more poignant with the recent passing of Ruth Bader Ginsburg and the very real possibility that the U.S. Supreme Court may decide to rule again on the Marriage Equality Act when, not if, this is going to happen, Amy Coney Barrett is appointed to the bench. How they can roll back the Marriage Equality Act, I honestly don't know, but I'm sure they're going to try. Now, as far as this film is concerned, though, it's a very good production, but it's not quite as good as Friedkin's. Parsons' Michael is too one note. He's angry and self-hating, whereas in the original, he was a nice person. You saw that in the beginning. He was a nice person who has a drinking problem and turns very nasty. Here, Michael is just self-hating and nasty. So that was rather disappointing. And honestly, in watching this new Michael, I can't understand why anyone would want to be friends with him. He's just not a nice person at all. Now, while Kinto's Harold is delightfully trippy because he's smoking marijuana nonstop, there was a quality to Frey's version of the character that was very like he seemed sort of unstable. Frey's version of Harold was, as I was watching it, I thought this is a guy who's going to commit suicide, whereas Kinto's version, I didn't think so. So there was something that was more interesting. There was meteor to Frey's version of Harold. And finally, let's be honest. Who would throw Matt Bomer out of bed? Straight or gay? Who would throw him out of bed? The guy, these eyes, the guy is so good looking. But anyhow, that's beside the point. Now, Montella's screenplay is, by and large, the same as Friedkin's. There are a few tweaks, though. Bernard, who was a bookstore sales clerk, is now a librarian, so he's become a professional, whereas before he wasn't. And Montello's Emery is a lot more flamboyant than Friedkin's. I mean, the other Emery was flamboyant, but this one's even more so, very dramatic. Donald, though, he remains a very bland character. This I thought was a weakness with the play. He's a very bland character whose backstory is barely explored. I was disappointed in that, but that's a flaw with the play, in my opinion. Now, instead, Montello inserts a few flashback vignettes that, while they look nice, they don't add much to the story. To me, it wasn't necessary. He also shows us what Hank and Larry are up to in Michael's bedroom, as if we can't figure it out for themselves. Now, I should just mention, in case you don't know, the two actors who play Larry and Frank, Tuck Watkins and Andrew Reynolds, are a couple in real life. They met, well, they might have known each other ahead of time, but they became a couple through this production. Very interesting. Now, even with all these weaknesses that I found, I think the film is still very well worth watching, especially if you've never seen the play or the original film. If you have a chance to check out the 1970 version, I'd say check it out, because I think it is the better one. But this one's pretty good. I suppose if they didn't have the first one, I would say, yeah, definitely, this one's great. But it's good. It's really good. So it's available now on Netflix. Certainly check it out. All right, it's now 8:58. I want to stop before 9 o'clock, so I'm going to shut up. There's next week we got The War with Grandpa. Now that's a whole interesting thing with Robert De Niro. I don't know if I'm going to see it. I'm not sure if I'm seeing it. There's The Doorman, which I am seeing next week at some point. A couple other films, so a lot to catch up on. Have a good weekend. Have a good week. Please remember to wear your mask when you're out in public. Wash your hands lots of times. Social distance. All those things that are going to keep you safe. The only way this is ever going to end, well, it'll end with a vaccine. But until then, you need to do it. You just need to do these things. Wear the mask. The masks work. See ya.